Hello, this is a video I decided to make after playing a few hours of the Killing Floor 3 beta. I'm not the biggest Killing Floor player, as evidenced by my hour count at both games, although I definitely played Killing Floor 1 a lot more than my Steam hours would indicate since I had a pirated copy of the game when I was way younger and on a way worse computer. Regardless, the first game caught my eye due to their grungy slaughterhouse feel that any gore-sided 9-year-old whose parents allow unfiltered access to the internet will like to consume. While the second game felt like a bit of an improvement over that, a KF 1.5 light, if you will. Well, what about Killing Floor 3? Eh, it's okay. To further clarify, Killing Floor 3 still feels like it has a bit of that familiar Killing Floor DNA in it. It's you and a group of up to 5 players against a horde of man-eating, lab-grown horrors. You survive for a finite number of waves, with the last wave ending in a boss fight against the big baddie. In the first game, we fought the Patriarch, while in the second game, we had a larger myriad of bosses, and so far, the third game consists of 3 bosses, one which, as far as my knowledge goes, is not available in the beta as of right now. But this DNA, this Killing Floor DNA, is mutated, so to speak, for good or worse. Well, what changed then? Let's go over some of the new changes. Specialists. I really don't think we need characters locked behind respective classes. Not only does this fuel player resentment towards the system as a whole, since they're likely going to be forced to play a character they don't like tied to a class that they do like playing, for example, Firebug, but also because I don't think the argument made in favor of the system is particularly that strong. In the general frequently asked questions thread that can be found on the Tripwire forums, they answer this better. Character avatars are tied to a specific class to help maintain clarity in gameplay. In Killing Floor 3, with so many bullets flying, Zeds exploding, blood spraying, and gore everywhere, this helps players quickly identify classes and coordinate better amidst the carnage. We know this is a change from previous titles in the franchise, but are confident that this makes for stronger moment-to-moment gameplay. You know why this doesn't hold up at all? We don't need an entirely new system dedicated to help quick identification of classes for better coordination, because we already had something like that for Killing Floor 1 and Killing Floor 2. It was quite literally just a basic element on the HUD. You see this? Class icons are already next to people's health and armor bars in both games. And in Killing Floor 2, they let you see your teammates' class icons through walls. I don't need to look at someone's character. Hey, that's Mr. Foster standing in the middle of all those ads. I just need to look at their class icon. It's easier and a lot faster to process than glancing at someone's model, especially if future characters get gas mask cosmetics. Because if that happens, how am I going to be able to tell, say, the sharpshooter from Foster at a first glance? But some players want to be immersed and not see floating class icons above teammates. Okay, that should be a HUD setting. Crosshairs were in Killing Floor 2, and that was one of the first things I disabled. Hit markers are now a part of Killing Floor 3, and that was also one of the first things I immediately removed. 9 out of 10 times, if you have to pick between a forced system for the sake of gameplay and a detail that adds to the gameplay but can be freely removed by our players even if detrimental to them, people obviously will prefer the customization. I don't need a crosshair to tell me where my bullets are going when I'm hip firing. I have the bullet tracers for that. I don't need a hit marker to tell if my bullets are hitting the Zeds because I have the gore feedback for that. And I don't need an entire specialist class system to tell where and what my teammates are because we had perk icons for that. We can't even change classes mid-game anymore. Once you load in as a commando, you are locked in as a commando. If the situation calls for a field medic because your team just barely got by last wave and nobody picked a medic class, you're screwed. You and nobody else on your team can make the swap to a different class. Now, I will admit, unlocking weapons from classes was a splendid choice. Originally, what Killing Floor 3 wanted to do was not only just lock characters behind the classes, they were locking weapons behind classes. You weren't even allowed to off meta. You had only the commando weapons if you were playing commando, and that's it. You were not able to buy weapons from other classes. They walked back on this decision because they realized that this limits player expression because it's really important right now in the instance of Killing Floor 3 to off perk a medic pistol, but we'll get to that later. Now, with the new system in place, a commando can use field medic submachine guns, and their damage-based skills will work for the submachine guns. At the end of the day, this isn't really that much of an impact on the game when it comes to bad things. It's definitely something that the community is going to get caught up on, and I don't think it's wrong for the community to get caught up on this because We never had an issue in the first two games where player identification was so important that we needed to scrap an entire icon system just to have better player models, just to tie characters behind classes. As far as shooing away fans goes, I feel like most people will either overlook this specialist system, most people will not care. You could argue that for the people who are pushing against this decision, they might be a vocal minority, or maybe most of these people will complain about it 5 to 10 minutes when they start playing the game and then completely forget about it, or maybe it will have a huge impact and it will cost them a lot of players. Especially since there's no restriction on how many classes there can be in a match, a lot of people can play Commando at once, so there's going to be a lot of Mr. Fosters. But there's no harm in fixing this. Unlocking characters from specialists would literally not hurt the game at all. Please fix this, Tripwire. User interface. Good lord, the user interface in this game does not do any favors. When you boot up the game, you're brought to a press any button to continue screen. After that, you're then sent to a main menu-esque area where you need to click on play multiplayer or play solo, which in turn leads you straight to a hub-esque area similar to Deep Rock Galactic or Dark Tide, where you need to run up to a big computer in the middle of the hub area to pick a mission so that you can then run to an aircraft that takes you to the mission, wait a 10-second cooldown, watch a liftoff animation, wait how long it takes for the matchmaking system to put you in a game, and then wait for the game to load. That sounds like an awful lot of work just to get into one game, doesn't it? Let's take a look. Now compare with Killing Floor 1.
Nice one, geezer.
And lastly, Killing Floor 2.
Wish I'd brought a magazine to read.
I don't understand why I'm being taken from one menu to another menu to a hub. Why not just put me straight away into the main menu? The hub also doesn't feel like it does many favors at the moment. It doesn't feel like it serves any purpose whatsoever. I'm not against the inclusion of a hub area, even though it does add to how long it takes to get into a game. But here's the thing, this hub area works in games like Darktide and Deep Rock Galactic because you can at least interact with the respective hub areas a little. But in Killing Floor 3, the hub has a firing range, which is pretty okay, I guess. You can also use the hub to access your specialist skills, pick your specialist with a little computer, just like Deep Rock Galactic, access the store, battle pass, and the armory. I don't even have to say anything about the store, but this is a modern game and modern games need to make extra profit. I'm not a fan of this business model either, since most of the time it leads to potential FOMO practices, such as store rotations, which make you question if the shiny, neat Mr. Foster bundle on the store has a risk of never ever coming back, or if the premium currency winds up being overpriced. But it is better than the loot box system we had in Killing Floor 2, although we're basically exchanging one extremely worse practice for a slightly better but still bad practice. As for the Battle Pass, my understanding of it is that it works just like Helldivers 2. You buy a pass, you keep it forever, you can buy those passes whenever you want, and you can get the premium currency by apparently completing weekly missions. I might be wrong since this is secondhand information, but there is a weekly challenge system in place for the beta. All it does at the moment is just give you some Battle Pass XP. Considering this is the best implementation of a Battle Pass system a live service game can do, thanks to Helldivers 2, I'm not really too miffed about this. No, they're not going to distribute new classes and weapons by the Battle Pass. But they also said we weren't going to have DLC weapons in Killing Floor 2, so the in-game HUD is also whatever. They could have definitely tried to stylize it, and they did with the character portrait on the bottom left, but it feels like they didn't really even put any thought onto the rest of it. It feels like they designed all of the HUD in 5 minutes, put the character portrait on the bottom left, and called it a day. The worst thing about all of the user interface so far is the trader UI. Why is everything so big? Why is it all so mobile shaped? It feels like I'm playing a mobile game. Why does autofill need an entire button worthy of an additional UI slot dedicated to it? Why did we need huge icons for armor, grenades, and syringes? The UI for the two other games was so much better than this. We certainly didn't need them to reinvent the trader UI. Give it a new stylization to match the game's new futuristic aesthetic, sure, but there was absolutely no need for a new user interface whatsoever. Gameplay and aesthetic. See, this is the part where it gets a bit funny. The game feels like it wants to play better than Killing Floor 2, but it doesn't quite reach that level yet. Firearms have been entirely replaced from an even split of real-life weapons to sci-fi weapons in a purely sci-fi. Now, I don't think these designs are bad. I kind of like them honestly, especially the MP6 or the SCAR, because they still resemble real-life weapons just slightly. But the animations...
Blah 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 blah
What is this? My hand clipped into the drum magazine, and I'm guessing it raised up to smack the bolt or something, but for some reason the animation just didn't play at all. It cuts off at that point. This made me not shoot my gun the first few times because I assumed the animation was still going, but this isn't the case. With this animation in particular, your reload ends the moment you put in the drum magazine. And strangely, the tactical reload doesn't have the same issue. There's some reports about Z animations being choppy and running at 2 frames. I didn't really have this problem. It is worth mentioning in the forums that they said that what causes this is actually a performance issue. Your computer likely cannot keep up with what's going on, so the first thing they do in the game is to give all of the Zs really laggy animations so that a bit of breathing room is given to your CPU. If I may go back to the main menu, is there a reason why your characters are just doing an idle pose animation? Your characters stand around with the same animation as if you were just holding your gun out. They're not hitting any pose, they're not even moving that much. They're just standing still on an idle pose. The running animations for players are fine, but once you finish a game, you're given this extraction cutscene, and good lord, the running speed looks like it gets slowed down by about 30% so that your characters don't run into the extraction ship too fast, but the animation itself doesn't slow down. You're given this impression that you're Scooby-Doo running in place, and as soon as you get into the VTOL Everyone is just standing around in that same idle pose. How about an actual animation where we load onto the drop craft? An animation where we're standing still? Or actually, don't even give us an animation at all. Just give us like a result screen of everything we did in that match. The movement system has been turned into a mix of Killing Floor 1 and 2. You move and sprint faster with your knife out, and weapons instead slow you down, just like in Killing Floor 1. You can also dodge and slide. Sliding is as generic as in any other recent shooter. You turn yourself into a lower target, which does let you dodge some husk projectiles, and you go forward slightly faster. Sliding on stairs impulses you downwards, though, which is insanely busted and puts a lot of distance between you and a horde of Zeds hot on your heels. Dodging seems a bit pointless. Maybe I'm missing something involved with dodging, but husks tend to just shoot the ground near you, and their projectiles have splash damage now, so dodging now seems harder. Since projectiles are a thing too, but there's so many of the fucking creeps that try to keep up and avoiding getting hit by their projectiles by dodging is quite difficult, especially how fast they shoot. So far, it feels like the only Zeds who you can dodge the projectiles are bloats and, not counting as a projectile, flesh bounce. Skrakes don't really use the grappling hook move enough, but I did have to deal with them firing it a few times, and it did seem dodgeable. You can now finish off Zeds a la Doom 2016 slash Doom Eternal.
You really let that Scrake have it.
Oh, that always makes my bollocks tingle.
So far, I've only been able to finish off Skrakes and Flesh Bounds, which even then seems wildly inconsistent on how you can finish them off or not. Sometimes they get stunned and they flash red, which indicates players that they can go perform a finisher. Sometimes they just die when their health hits zero. Finishing moves lock you in place, which at first seemed horrible, but it appears that the Zeds have a buffer second or two where they don't target you, which lets you move away so you're not in a bad spot. Finishing Skrakes, however, seems pointless. Finishing Flesh Bounds does cause an explosion to kill Zeds nearby instantly, even if they're full health, and this seems to also critically injure Skrakes and Flesh Bounds, so it's a neat little addition. Speaking of Zeds, their new designs are fantastic. If there's one thing carrying this decision to go from London backstreet slaughterhouse to grungy sci-fi, it's the Zed designs. These things are really metal. The level design, though, not so much. Is this even a Zed invasion? The store description says we're the last line of defense against Horzine's inhuman army of monstrous Zeds, the future's in your hands, etc. But the only urban map that we have that isn't a military outpost or an underground lab is City Streets, and that map is terribly clean. We have crashed cars, we have some bodies strewn about, but it's daytime. The map is insanely bright and clean. Maybe I'm biased, but I feel like we could have definitely had something like West London or even Burning Paris while also maintaining that sci-fi feel. You could change this map's lighting to be set at dawn and throw a few more crashed cars and even burning corpse files, and you could call this KF3's equivalent to West London. In fact, call it anything but City Streets. That's a very generic name for a map, but whatever. The rest of the maps, like I said, happen to be military outposts. There was this one map I played where it looked fairly wrecked and like it fit the description that the game's store page was trying to give off, and so was the Underground Lab map I played as well, but City Streets really needs some more love put into it. I believe it is worth mentioning though, optimization in this game is kind of all over the place. I haven't had any issues with stuttering aside from a few small hitches that happen in the hub, and I'm able to maintain a static 100 to 120 FPS, but I've seen other people with rigs that can't even hit past 30 frames properly unless they turn lumen off, which sometimes breaks the lighting in maps, it seems. I personally turned it off and saw no changes in regards to my frame rate, but for some reason, after a few minutes, City Streaks looks absolutely horrible, as if the map just got covered in dark pitch. Weapon attachments. In theory, this is a good idea. Gone are the days of trying to aim with some of the most horrendous iron sights that some weapons in this franchise have been plagued with, and in practice, this seems to be somewhat okay in the beta. You need to acquire materials and schematics in order to craft attachments, of which you get from the following. Destroying random objects on the maps, such as camera and holo posters, and killing Zeds nets you with resources. Killing bigger Zeds even nets you rare resources. Schematics for attachments are obtained by just playing with that weapon in the match. Think of it as a weapon XP that unlocks attachment schematics. These attachments range from things like recoil grips to red dot sights, drum magazines, extra ammunition types, etc. Getting schematics is fine, although I wish it also had a challenge system to go with it, like getting a schematic every 250 headshots or so. Resources, though, they're not shared between players at all. If someone joins the match and proceeds to run from camera to camera, shooting them all down, you don't get anything. This is such an easy fix, too. All they have to do is make the resources shared. This way, players won't stumble over each other running to that one stun scrake so they can go steal the kill, even though it just leaves the backline exposed to a bunch of clots, so that they can get a rare resource, or people aren't racing to shoot cameras off the map before their teammates can. It feels like a team effort and reward. Like in Darktide, where if a player picks up any of the resources such as plasteel or diamantine, everyone gets both of those resources. Self-healing and the field medic got a nerf across the board. This is a very polarizing decision. They made it so syringes are now a limited resource rather than an infinite recharging item, like in Killing Floor 1 and Killing Floor 2. This includes the field medic star launchers. On one hand, self-healing was busted in the first two games. Death by 1,000 cuts while kiting large Zed hordes was hardly an occurrence, because by the time that Fleshbound caught up to you on Hell on Earth and slapped you around a few times, you'd always be able to pop the self-healed and turn around and kill it or do some extra damage. Likewise, field medics have to be more careful to not waste their healing darts on people over 90% of their health bar and instead prioritize low health teammates. This adds a layer of tactical teamwork to the game that should work. But here's the thing. The dart launchers are already locked behind attachments on medic guns, which means that for some of them, you have to grind and get the schematics and then the materials, and then you can put the attachment on your gun. It's nice to see under barrel medic grenade launchers making a comeback, but still, this is a change that could have been kept to Hell on Earth. Most casual KF players come home to shoot stuff up, maybe dipping their toes in a hard difficulty if need be, and Hell on Earth was already in need of something to make it stand out from other difficulties aside from RZs have more health and hit harder. Maybe an argument in regards to the syringe back can be made, since it gives you a syringe whenever a teammate throws one down, but they can also instead just make it so in normal difficulties, you gain a 50% recharge on your syringe if you interact with it. Another thing that curbs the kiting playstyle is that ammo boxes no longer spawn naturally around the map. Teammates must throw these down for you to pick up ammo and grenades from. I don't think this is too bad, honestly. There's so many skills that give you a lot of reserve ammo. The Medic's MP6 can hold up to like 700 rounds on reserve. Hardly found myself running out of ammo. The same thing for grenades. There's skills that make you carry more grenades, and even other skills that upgrade those grenades, which often makes it so just 2 to 3 grenades are enough for you to do a dent. Multi-tools no longer weld doors. Not like that was super important. Killing Floor 2's map design already made welding yourself into a holdout spot difficult because every room had a potential Z spawn in several of the maps, so you always needed an escape route if need be. Multi-tools are now instead an item you can choose to bring with you at the start of a round, or buy them at the trader to let you unlock armor caches, turrets, in specific rooms, and even trigger Z traps. These are insanely useful. Being able to replace armor mid-round is always welcome, and the turrets though feel like they pack a punch. We have a gadget now that traps doors when you put them on, effectively replacing door welding, which is more useful than the door welding system we had before. There's a few other gadgets, but at first glance, they don't really seem particularly useful beyond the three I just mentioned. One of these gadgets makes noise and lures Zeds to it, which, whatever. And another gadget shocks Zeds nearby. It's some sort of mine, except Sharpshooter's throwable is a mine. Regardless, the new Zed moves are neat. Crawlers on walls and ceilings is the stuff of horrors. Husks flying around, and Fleshbounds plus Scrakes having abilities to close the gap or hit players at a distance adds some much needed threat to them. The new bosses are also visually great, although the Chimera has this weird animation where it looks more like it's going down a portal in Steph animation, where I'm very confident it's just supposed to be melting into a gory goop pile. Other minor random gripes. Before I start my overall conclusions, this is just a list of really minor things that I don't see most people complain about on the forums or on the subreddit, and I didn't really want to dedicate an extensive part of the video for this. Maybe these will be fixed in the launch release of the game, or maybe they won't, because the game is releasing a month away. I kind of doubt all of these will be fixed. So let's start. Z models tend to disappear when killed sometimes, probably because of performance reasons. Blood splatter on guns is really inconsistent and low quality. It looks almost as if someone put a JPEG texture of blood over your gun. Gibs become weird, low quality meatballs sometimes, probably for the same performance reasons. There's no text chat. Roads. There's no server browser. The game uses instead a matchmaking system. Terrible. Z executions done while in Z time will cause your FOV to flip out. Sirens tend to randomly spawn with no animation in the city streets map. Skrakes and Fleshbounds no longer have a global roar when spawning in. Roads, the game's handler, will instead call them out, but they gave global spawn sounds to Sirens. They have an air raid siren when they spawn in. Weird. Roads. Again. I don't like her. The ninja character sometimes loses animations when using shurikens or kunais. The clot or cyst grab animation starts off very laggy, but when you do a finisher move on them, the animation becomes smooth. Conclusions. I strongly think Killing Floor 3 has a decent base to work with. The fact it's already releasing with more content in Killing Floor 2's early access, which was extremely flawed not only in gameplay but content as well, is good, although the entire thing just feels like a puzzle the Tripwire was putting together and then gave up halfway through and just left the board pieces scattered. Which is to say, they'll get back and fix it later. Probably. This happened with other horde shooters, honestly. Darktide had this problem where, in its closed beta and release period, it was strongly disliked by a lot of Vermintide fans, but the game eventually bounced back. Payday 3 had the same issue, but unfortunately, that game is not bouncing back anytime soon because Starbreeze gutted it in favor of some random Dungeons and Dragons game. If Tripwire sticks with Killing Floor 3, they're definitely going to have a strong game. Not like Killing Floor 1 and Killing Floor 2 strong, but definitely strong enough to last it on its own, especially with crossplay now being a thing for the third game. Well, that's it for the video. I hope you guys liked this video. This is my first time making videos like these, and I might do more in the future. I'll see y'all on the Killing Floor.